Welcome back. So we're going to look at kind of how these company transitions work and what their stages are. And this article identifies 3 stages. It says the first stage, or the first generation of a company, in a family business that is more or less the entrepreneurial enterprise with direct management. The second is characterized, assuming it makes it to the second generation, is typified by a rapidly growing product line and a market situation with second-level management set up in specialized functions. In other words, you've got a manager who is managing some people, some other managers. You got the boss, the family member, who's managing some managers who in turn manage a bunch of employees. And then the third stage is when we get into divisional operations with a diverse product line. This kind of management winds up becoming more professionalized. It looks more like the matrix style organization that I've drawn on the board many times in the course. And they actually give a pretty nice table, this Exhibit 2. Those of you that are following along with the article, follow with me. Those of you that haven't had a chance to print the article, don't worry. I'm going to go through it with you right now. So, for kind of the first stage, which is normally the first generation of a family business, the number one problem is like any other business, it's survival. Just trying to make it from quarter to quarter, sometimes even from day to day. And the main thing that you've got to try to figure out is how to take all the diverse talents that you as a family have and turn all those talents into a unified company. That's a lot harder than you think. Again, you've got to be able to put the rivalries aside and you've got to have people emotionally invested. The control systems, of course, are very personalized. You've got someone who is head of the family and head of the business. And of course, some of it's going to be market oriented, right? If you do something dumb, you're going to have to shut your doors. The rewards, of course, are owning your own firm. It's usually very intrinsic. And of course, building something for the next generation. The management style is very paternalistic. The head of the family is also the head of the business. So they run in many ways. Unfortunately, many times the family runs the business just like they run their family, for better or for worse. Structure is going to be very informal, right? Because it's very much a family business. It's based on trust, respect, and family ties. And the CEO's primary task, for the most part, is going to be supervising what few employees they have and building up the market. And they say levels of management, that means they say 2 because it's usually the head of the family and head of the business managing the other family members. Now the second stage of a family business, which usually happens as it's past the second generation, although that's not always the case, the core problem is management of growth. Okay, you've got this entrepreneurial venture, it's here to stay. How do we either maintain the growth that we have or grow faster, but hopefully not decline? And that's when this is the level where you start looking at getting some degree of specialized management functions. Maybe one son becomes the accountant and the other one becomes the inventor and another one becomes the innovator, and maybe the daughter does something too. Like you actually start specializing because it's not just one entrepreneur managing everything. The control systems, of course, you wind up starting to look at cost systems and potential outside growth. Why do these people go into a family business? Again, it's because your identity is tied to that of the firm, but you're also looking at hopefully getting a good salary and addressing or gaining growth. The managerial style, you start integrating a specialist. Maybe this is when you hire an accountant or a marketing person. The management is still going to be very collaborative because it's a small firm. You start getting into, and that's what they mean by getting functional specialists, right? Getting your accountant, your HR person, etc. And of course, the CEO's primary task is managing their specialized managers, managing those that run your particular locations, your technical staff, etc. And you normally have at least 3 levels of management. So you got the CEO managing some managers who manage a bunch of employees. Now the third stage that they talk about is managerial control and allocation of resources. That's when you start having kind of a full-on matrix-style organization with a variety of strategic business units. You start focusing on profit centers and performance criteria. So you focus on growing the successful strategic business units and cutting those that are not. The rewards, again, still going to be salary. You're still going to have a desire to increase the family name, but now you're going to start getting into things like stock options. Again, you're looking like a regular, large, professionally run organization. In addition to the specialists, you start integrating more generalists, more general managers. The structure, again, is a matrix-style organization, and you will probably have at least 4 levels of management. So you've got the CEO, who is managing. Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
You want to say hi?
Hey guys, security guy. How y'all doing?
Say hi to everyone.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. Have a good day. That's the security guard. And you get 4 levels of management normally. So you got the CEO managing a bunch of other managers who manage some lower level managers who manage some employees and maybe even further down the line. Now, they make it look real neat on that table in like these kind of 3 stages, but you've got to remember that growth is very rarely linear. These 3 stages look very, very different. You've got kind of a hardcore entrepreneurship, kind of like a small and medium enterprise / a little bit more on the family business side, to a professionally run company. Okay? These look very different. And what happens a lot of times is this change winds up becoming metamorphic between the stages, but in between those stages themselves, it's usually not a linear progression. In fact, it may look like the company is stagnating for a time, but what's really going on is there's changes being made inside the company that may not be visible to those outside the company. And this time is important for reorganization and organizational development, okay? Even if it's not in terms of growth. This is important for the long-term vision of the firm. Now, those of you that are my students, what I'd like you to do, I want you to read the case in the comments. I want you to tell me what you think about the 3 main cases in this story. To give the example of the Krish family, the Quinn family, and the Wells family. Are there any examples that you can relate to? How do some of those little mini cases that they have in this story support some of the concepts that we've already developed in this playlist, but also in some of the other lectures that I've presented for this course? The hardest part with the family business transitions is a lot of times these transitions happen after one generation dies. That's always a difficult situation. If the transition happens while the previous generation is still alive, that generation that is giving up has to accept that the company will live even if they won't. And there's also some kind of transition roles, right? You've got the older generation who transitions from being a boss to being a mentor, and the younger generation that transfers from being an employee to being a manager. And of course, this is hard, right? Because as a mentor, as you're kind of transitioning out of the firm, you may be frustrated with the things that the younger generation is doing. And this is why it's important to either set up a system of mediation or confrontation. Now, the mediation case is really useful. I like the story in the Krish family. In this particular case. The mother didn't really have anything to do with the business, but she was the mother of the household, and she was able to mediate the disputes in a very calming, soothing way between the first generation and the second generation so that they could come to kind of mutual agreement, mutual understanding. That's ideal, that you've got that kind of extra professional manager who's a friend of the family, somebody within the family that can. Think about how goats are very soothing to horses. You need a goat, right? You need a goat to help kind of soothe disagreements so that you can have a productive relationship moving forward. But you can also have kind of what they call confrontations, but they're not really confrontations necessarily. But these are meetings where you focus on communication. You set up rules for the family procession. Sometimes they call these things family retreats, but at least you can communicate what expectations are, because bad communication really hurts any enterprise. Great. So I hope you've enjoyed this particular playlist. As always, give me a like, so that's a thumbs up, comment down below, and make sure you subscribe. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next playlist.